we identified 6 fairly broad recommendations or directions, if you will, for the future in terms of trying to accelerate and strengthen patient-centered care in Sweden. The first one I've alluded to, the patient's rights, if you will, are on the books, but they're mostly presented as provider obligations. The provider will do this, the provider will do that, the county council is responsible for doing this, but they're not couched in such a way that the patient has any real ability to, if there's no compliance with that, the patient can complain, and that's a good outcome. But what else can the patient do? And when we're seeing such a disconnect between what the rights are on the books and what's really happening, it's clear that there needs to be more effort to try to reconcile those things by strengthening the patient's position. And there are many different ways that could be done. We didn't take a position on which one. Now, a second point, establishing patients as full partners with their providers. Again, this really relates to the attitudinal changes. I think there needs to be more to get the word out that patient experience, having a positive patient experience isn't just a nice thing to have. It's something that means better outcomes and lower costs. And I think when that message begins to resonate, I think healthcare systems will begin to respond. But that message really needs to get out. Third, actively engaging and involving patients in all levels of decision-making and design of healthcare activities in the system. I would say we found that there are plenty of examples of patients being involved, but they're still at a bit of a, let's say, not innovative sort of approach. Having a patient on a board, fine. Everybody else is an expert. They're really able to engage. The patient, not so much. They're not a full-time patient. This is not their job. There are plenty of new ways to think about involving patients, whether that's, instead of doing surveys, maybe when you're in the waiting room, you can just do something on your phone with an app. And, there are plenty of ways to have more direct patient engagement and to make sure patients are involved in all aspects of decision making. And I think once we see where this is a routine, serious, non-token kind of approach, we should see better processes and better outcomes ultimately. So fourth, continuity of care. There certainly are things that are going on in Sweden to try to improve continuity of care, and some of the most promising relate to changes in remuneration for healthcare providers, to get them to start thinking about themselves as a team who are responsible for an episode of care. And this is something that we really need to highlight because we need more experimentation, we need more solving this important problem, because this is an area both within healthcare and between health and social care, where really people are falling through the cracks. There really are problems here, and we need more experimentation, we need more effort, we need more focus. The last 2 points relate to being able to move forward in terms of our analytical capabilities in patient-centeredness. As I mentioned before, we really think it would be a good idea to engage patients in understanding, in contributing to thinking in Sweden about what does patient-centered healthcare look like in Sweden. If you wanted to have a patient-centered healthcare system, what would be the dimensions that are most important to you? What would it look like? So we would suggest a good next step in Sweden would be really bringing patients together and taking a look at some of the leading models and saying, is this what you think is important? Would you like to see some tweaks? Obviously, you want to have some consistency with international models so that you can do international benchmarking, but there's plenty of room within that to tailor the approach to Swedish patients' needs. And finally, let me conclude with our final effort. It's critically important, time and time again, we know that unless you're tracking something, unless you're measuring something, it's not going to improve. And Sweden has started to do a lot in terms of tracking patient-centeredness, but there's a lot more that can be done. There are problems. The National Patient Survey is great, but there are some technical issues that really need to be addressed in terms of making those data most useful. We need to start moving to a step where those data are available to be used for quality improvement purposes and available to help patients make choices. So there's work to be done here too.